Hello everyone and welcome back to Motorcast, and today I'm back here with Josh as we are going to be reviewing this weekend's F2 events from Monaco, in which was a very dramatic and extremely pivotal weekend in terms of the championship. It was one where championship leader Charles Leclerc of course scored no points due to no fault of his own, pretty much on home soil, which is extremely disappointing for him. From the pole position where it looked like he might have been dominating, and Ollie Rowland was able to win the feature race to cut the championship to just 3 points, even with only a 9th place finish in the sprint race. So Josh, I guess it has to be said, if Leclerc doesn't win the championship from this point, how big a weekend will this be, and how pivotal could this weekend prove?
Yeah, this was a very, very important weekend for, I think, both Leclerc and Ollie Rowland as well. And really, I think this championship may very well be decided as how, Leclerc comes back from this. Is he going to, can I take this as a big knock, and, is this going to dent his confidence, or is he going to use this as motivation to really get back in there and set this record straight in Baku?
Yeah, I guess it was slightly a weird weekend in which potentially the most impressive driver, I guess you could say, was the one who had a double DNF, really, in terms of at least what Charles Leclerc was able to do on the track, even if he wasn't able to back it up with the results. I guess, of course, there were several other drivers that were very impressive this weekend, but we'll come to that a little later on. I guess, like you said, the big question is, how will Charles Leclerc respond from this? Do you think he's got kind of the right mindset to come back from what has been such a disappointing weekend, and do you think he'll take, kind of the positives from it and be able to kind of reopen the lead we've seen him create in the early stages of this championship? Or will this be potentially a chance for Ollie Rowland to maybe take the initiative from here?
I don't think Leclerc's going to be that worried at this stage. I think if this was to continue, say, into Baku, then that would be a big worry. But we've seen before that Leclerc can come back from these kind of issues and incidents. We saw in his GP3 title-winning season, he had a couple of knocks, which might have dented his confidence a bit, but he came back from that, and of course, won that championship brilliantly. But then again, we did see, of course, the previous year before that in European Formula 3, had a healthy championship lead, and then unfortunately it all went kind of, just one thing after another. So it's, as I mentioned, I think it'd be important for him to get straight back on it in Baku, but certainly now a massive opportunity for Ollie Rowland. It really does looking like a bit of a two-horse race at the front of the championship, although I think we are going to discuss a few of the other contenders because it might not be that clear. We'll have to see, but yeah, big chance for Rowland, and he certainly sees the initiative in the feature race. Got the maximum from that, while Leclerc was having, of course, his issues. Didn't quite manage to do the same in the sprint race. His pace kind of faded, and of course fell to 9th. So not the best capitalisation this weekend, but certainly, of course, that win in the feature race, like you mentioned, we'll get to the end of the season, and we really could look back on this weekend as one of the defining moments in either, Rowland's championship victory or Leclerc's kind of fight back to the championship. Although, of course, as you mentioned, he is still, of course, in the championship lead thanks to those 4 points for, of course, pole for the feature.
Yeah, of course, you touched on Ollie Rowland and how he's kind of seized the initiative this weekend in terms of the championship, and everything finally came together for him, really, this weekend, at least in terms of the feature race. A bit of luck, of course, but how much confidence do you think Ollie Rowland can take from this, and will it kind of give him perhaps the upper hand now over Leclerc, or would you still say Leclerc's a very strong favourite?
Yeah, I still rank Leclerc as a favourite, but certainly now we've seen Rowland finally get that win, in Formula 2. He was so close on a number of occasions last year. He's always shown kind of race-winning pace, but it's never quite come together for him. But finally, of course, it has now. And yeah, this is going to be such a major confidence boost for him, and hopefully he can really go into the next few rounds and really challenge Leclerc all the way throughout the feature races and the sprint races. Of course, to win the championship, though, you've got to have a strong feature and sprint race, and it may be a bit of concern in the sprint race for him, with him kind of going backwards, but then on the other hand, did a fantastic job from in the feature race, taking nothing away from him. But I guess in the end he didn't really beat Leclerc in a straight fight. Of course, benefited from the time in the safety car, got the jump on Leclerc, and of course Leclerc had his issues. So I think it's a bit too early to say Rowland is now the favourite, but certainly he's got it's not looking, it's looking a lot better than it was after Barcelona, and he's really on a really, really good run. So yeah, let's see if this win can give him, that extra level to really win this championship.
Yeah, I think certainly Ollie Rowland's finally got to take a bit of confidence from this, obviously finally getting that win under his belt that has definitely been coming for quite a while, but on the other hand, like you said, he hasn't actually beaten Leclerc in a straight fight this weekend, and I think it does say quite a lot that we're 3 events into the season and Charles Leclerc's had a double DNF, and yet he's still leading the championship. But looking a bit further down now, we have got Markelov in 3rd, 14 points behind, and Matsushita also moving up towards the front now. So do you see this as kind of a two-way fight? I guess we touched on this. Or do you see perhaps some of those guys, like we said, like Markelov, Matsushita, perhaps getting a bit more consistency together now that like we haven't seen in the past, and potentially challenging for the championship? Or do you reckon kind of with their specialities in Monaco and the strategy, which we'll come on to a little bit later on, do you reckon kind of this will be sort of a high point in their season, and perhaps they'll have kind of the dips that it ultimately costs them the chance to fight for the championship? Or do you reckon this is kind of more than a two-horse race now after Leclerc's difficulties this weekend?
I think two drivers, Roland and Leclerc, they're the only men for me that can actually win the championship. But that's not to say that Markelov, Giotto, Matsushita might, push those two all the way, and they might still be in contention come Abu Dhabi. So certainly, like you mentioned, a really important weekend for all three of those. Bit of a Monaco speciality, for Markelov and Matsushita. But even so, they've got they've both got a win to their name this season, in Bahrain and Barcelona. So really, I don't think it's a major worry for them. I don't think this was much of a fluke really, and I think they'll be right on it over the next few rounds. And of course for Baku, that's going to be a big test for Matsushita, because of course last year we all know what happened, getting that weekend ban as well for Austria. So this is a big this is his big chance for retribution really, next round, and that could possibly decide whether or not he's a championship contender. Yeah,
I guess that's a big weekend, isn't it, for Matsushita? Going back to Baku, I guess he's kind of got to try and get the monkey off his back, really, in terms of getting just a solid weekend there, really, with no real trouble, and one where kind of he can have the attention off him rather than the focus kind of back on the events of last year, and he can get that confidence building again that might potentially be taken away from him coming back to the scene of what was obviously such a torrid weekend for him last season. But moving away from the title battle slightly now, and more onto the a bit of focus on the races themselves, particularly the feature race, of course, where a lot of it came down to the two safety cars we saw after Latifi's retirement, and the incident between Delatraz and Vizoyu, which we'll come to a little bit later. But with the race slightly changed by strategy, with obviously drivers staying out after the first safety car, and it kind of backfiring a little bit when the second safety car came out. Obviously varied from driver to driver, but Roland, obviously as we mentioned, coming through to win, followed by Markelov and Matsushita, the two Monaco specialists. So kind of looking at the podium, that kind of previous Monaco experience and success we've talked about, and obviously especially with Markelov, that good strategic nous that we saw last season, did that potentially help? And were there good results this weekend kind of down to strategy, or a bit more luck going their side?
I think Monaco is a bit of both, really, isn't it? Of course you've got to have the raw pace, but I think luck and strategy are the main components of getting a good Monaco weekend. And obviously, like you mentioned, Roland, Markelov, Matsushita, they're three of the most experienced guys in this field, so that really did show. And really, if you look at the top five, the big name there is Alexander Albon, of course, a rookie in fourth place, and he scored points as well in the sprint race. Sixth consecutive points finish for Alexander Albon. Really, really is doing a mega job in his rookie year. Of course, Leclerc is going to take a lot of the attention, and of course rightly so, but we can't forget about, of course, his ex-teammate and GP3 championship rival Alexander Albon, who is I think doing a splendid job. Coming back to the podium, of course we mentioned great job from Markelov, Matsushita, and Roland as well, of course. Definitely down to strategy, I think, but they still had, I think, the pace and a bit of luck as well to really get that result in the feature race. And of course we'll talk, I think, about the sprint race, because luck probably came into it to do that for a few certain drivers, but that's Monaco. You can't complain, and really that kind of reverse grid has the biggest effect really on Monaco.
Yeah, I think that does show kind of how much of a unique race Monaco is, kind of the effect it has in terms of both maybe a bit of luck coming into play, but definitely the certain element of skill in terms of strategy, and obviously just keeping out the barriers, which is a very important thing around Monaco, not just in F2 of course, but in F1 and all the other formulas as well. But as we were saying about those guys that finished on the podium, all of which finished relatively near to where they started in terms of the sprint race and their reverse grid slot there. So obviously getting a fair bit of consistency for the rest of the season. And you touched on Alexander Albon, of course, coming on to him now. He's been extremely impressive in his rookie F2 year, finishing a very impressive 4th and 6th. Maybe not quite the result he deserved in the feature race, obviously running second to Leclerc for quite a while, but still he's shown a lot of speed, and particularly that consistency that you touched on. which is kind of unusual at this level, really. We kind of see, we've touched on the title battle already, the fact that it's kind of Leclerc versus Roland, mainly because of their levels of consistency we see throughout the season. But Albon has shown that brilliantly this season. He's finished in the top 8 every single race, and even though he's yet to finish on the podium, I'm sure that is just around the corner. So what do you make of his season so far, and where can he maybe go from here?
Yeah, I mean, Giotto, Albon and King are the only 3 drivers to have, scored points in every race. So, obviously, Giotto and King, both very experienced, of course, in GP2, Formula 2. And obviously, Albon's a rookie. So, yeah, I think he's doing a mega job. And in terms of where he goes from here, well, as you mentioned, I think podiums will not be too far away. And it's just nice to see, really, ART back in that kind of championship fight. I mean, if you look at the team's championship, there's an absolute mega fight going on between Russian Time Dams, ART and Prema. I think there's about kind of 40 points separating those 4. It's all really, really close between them. And kind of these, whoever kind of has the strongest driver pairing, of course, is going to decide this in what is a fairly equal kind of formula. And to have that consistency with Albon, and hopefully if he wins as well for Matsushita, it is a good kind of sign, I think, for ART, who have kind of tended to have a kind of clear number 1 and number 2 in kind of previous years. We had Sorokin, of course, last year. We had Van Dorn before. So it is nice to see kind of 2 fairly equal drivers, to be honest. Even though Matsushita has the upper hand with experience, I honestly think Albon's going to be right up there, to be honest, in terms of the end of the season. And I certainly wouldn't be surprised if we saw him win a race. But at the very least, I think podiums are more than likely for Albon.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, actually, about the fact that ART have got kind of a good mix of drivers, really, with Matsushita having the pace to win races quite often, if not having the consistency maybe to challenge for the championship. Then Albon, even though he's not necessarily slower than Matsushita, obviously this being his first year in F2, he's the one who's bringing home the consistent points, finishing sort of in maybe the lower or mid regions of the points in every race so far. So that's a very, very positive sign for the ART team. Moving along now to some of the other major players in this year's championship so far. So Luca Giotto having a very, very strong weekend once again, taking 5th place in the feature race, helped, as many other drivers were, of course, by that first safety car. And then we have a look at Jordan King, who again, a fairly quiet if solid weekend, bringing home a few points there as well. So what do you make of those guys, some of the other, I guess you could call them the major players in this year's championship, the guys who are really looking to win races and get on the podium consistently?
Yeah, solid weekend for Luca Giotto. If not quite as spectacular as Markelov, we know Giotto is not the biggest fan of Monaco. He seems to go fairly well, but it's certainly not his favourite track, like possibly it is for Markelov. So I definitely expect Giotto to kind of come more into his own in kind of Austria and kind of Silverstone territory. Those kind of more traditional tracks. Whereas kind of the street tracks, maybe Giotto's not so strong on. But it's important to get points on the weekends in the tracks that you're not quite as strong as, and this is exactly what Luca Giotto did. So certainly puts him in good stead, I think. To be kind of a fringe kind of title contender, you never really know with Giotto. I mean, he could go on a bit of a run, certainly with that Russian Time team, and we talk about ART having a strong lineup, but obviously so do Russian Time as well, and of course, so much so that they're leading the championship now after this round. So yeah, great job from both Markelov and Luca Giotto. Jordan King kind of doing his usual job, MP Motorsport seemingly not quite having a strong pace, a few mechanical issues as well, I believe. King was pretty disappointed, I think, in the feature race. He'd have been right, I think, kind of in the top 5, top 6. And without that issue, and then of course, unfortunately finished down in 9th, which is the worst position pretty much to finish in a feature race. Of course, just 1 place outside of that reverse grid pole. And then he managed to finish 8th in the sprint race, which I guess was pretty decent. And really, I think King just kind of getting the most he can, really, unfortunately, out of that MP Motorsport package, which of course is not quite up there with the likes of Russian Time and ART, unfortunately.
Yeah, solid weekends from both those guys. Looking a bit further down the order now, and we touched earlier on the fact that second safety car was brought out by a collision between Louis Delatraz and the new driver for this weekend, Robert Vizoyu. So what did you make of that incident? It looked like a bit of a clumsy one there down at Mirabeau.
Yeah, very, very needless. I really do feel sorry for Louis Delatraz. He's had quite a few kind of unfortunate incidents in his short time in Formula 2 already. And yeah, this was a bit of a silly one, really. I mean, it was a shame because Campos this season really just keeps on getting worse and worse, no matter who they bring in, whether it be Mary Coletti or Vishu. in this round. And I mean, they're the only team yet to score points. So really not what Campos Racing needed, not what Delitraz needed either. Really having a difficult start to his kind of Formula 2 campaign, and that incident certainly didn't help.
Yeah, again, looking a bit further down the order, that saw Norman Nato having another tough weekend. Obviously, another double DNF and a similar problem to Leclerc actually in the feature race, ironically, from what I was hearing. So we spoke about this after Spain, about how his season's kind of gone downhill after that second place in Bahrain, where it looked like, after a kind of a strong 2016, he was going to maybe push on, and he did start the season very well, of course. So, what's gone wrong for him? Has it been kind of luck? Has it been his pace? Has it been maybe something else? So where has his season gone so downhill so quickly?
I think a bit of bad luck is involved. I think I hate to blame the team, but Arden have not quite had the success in kind of GP2 that kind of, for example, Norman Nato's former team Racing Engineering have had. I mean, having said that, obviously Racing Engineering having a pretty dire season as well. So it's a tricky one really for Nato. I think it's just kind of a combination of things. Hopefully to be back on it. He was very strong in Monaco last year, and it was such a shame to really see him as not involved in this weekend really, unfortunately, with those incidents and those problems. It's a big bit of unfortune for Nato, and really his season has derailed, and now for the rest of the season it's just getting some big results, because any hope of a championship disappeared in Barcelona, and has been kind of backed up with another unfortunately dire weekend in Monaco.
Yeah, I mean, moving on now to the feature race, and we did say after Spain that there's a possibility of a very, very different podium being thrown up in this one, just due to the reverse grid pole and obviously it being so difficult to overtake, and that is certainly what we got, obviously, with Johnny Cecotto starting on pole and Nick De Vries alongside him, and then De Vries making that fantastic move into turn one on his teammate with Rapax, eventually able to lead home a fairly easy and simple, even though it was kind of impressive, fairly decent 1-2 for the team, with Gustav Mallier taking a podium in third place. So, like we said, a relatively simple race for all these three, who benefited through kind of strategy in the feature race to get them there in the first place. So how impressive were those guys in the feature race, and how much of that do you put down to simply the starting position, and how much of that is down to kind of their drive, and where do they go from here? Can they maybe use this to build a much stronger season from here? Because obviously none of them at the moment, despite maybe the likes of De Vries having a fairly solid start to the season, it's kind of all come together for him here this weekend. And do you reckon he can use this to maybe build on this for the rest of the season now from here?
Yeah, I mean, De Vries has been working really, really hard all season. He's got some really, really strong qualifying results, and finally rewarded, of course, with this sprint race victory, of course, in Monaco. And I think, he certainly deserved that win after, the great work he's been putting in the season. That was, his results so far really hasn't justified what's been a great season for Nick De Vries. And Rapax's first 1-2 since they were founded, so that's really, really good effort from that Italian team. And, of course, Johnny Cecotto, of course, it wasn't a second on merit really. It was down to the starting positions, as it always is in Monaco. But you've still got to take the opportunity, still got to keep it out of the barriers. Cecotto and Mallier were under a bit of pressure, to be fair to them. From the Russian time duo, and we're looking pretty racy behind them. So they did a good job to kind of keep them behind. Good to see Cecotto, of course, back on the podium for, I believe, the first time, I want to say, since the season finale last year in Abu Dhabi. And Rapax seem to be really, really strong pre-season, and they seem to be finally delivering on that pace, which is good to see, and so important for Gustav Mallier and Racing Engineering team. I think I mentioned before, it's been a pretty woeful season for Racing Engineering. They're really used to kind of fighting for championships, but unfortunately for Mallier and Delitraz, it's not been a great season so far. But Mallier really seems to be turning a bit of a corner, and I definitely agree. I think this could be a massive confidence boost for Mallier in particular, and I think De Vries as well, to finally get a result after so much hard work and promises been put in pretty much since the end of last season, in kind of preparation for this assault on his, of course, rookie F2 season.
Yeah, very impressive podium there for those three guys, even if it was slightly, don't want to say lucky, but kind of the more simple of races. But of course you still got to keep out of the barriers in Monaco, like you said, and even though it might not have been totally on merit, it still should be a very big confidence boost for those guys. But as we were saying, the sprint race was kind of locked in terms of following the feature race. Everyone was kind of kind of, locked in from where they started a little bit. So was there anyone else a bit further down the grid who stood out in obviously what is such a difficult place to kind of make an impression in Monaco if you're starting perhaps in the middle of the pack? Was there anyone who maybe stood out as impressive out of the guys we haven't covered, maybe further down the championship, who haven't had such a good season so far?
Well, Nabil Jeffrey, for one, in his second season in the sport, got 11th place in the sprint race, which may not seem like much, but I thought that was actually a really good effort from Jeffrey. He's actually the biggest mover in the championship. I think he moves up about 5 places. Unfortunately, still hasn't scored a point, but I think that's a big achievement, really, for the Malaysian. Sean Galale as well, I think was impressive all weekend, really, and was really unlucky not to get points in the feature race. But unfortunately, he fell foul, I think, of penalties once again, unfortunately, which is becoming quite a bit of a major issue really for Sean Galale. Hopefully he can get that rectified. Canamasters as well, really, really good at Monaco, but not getting the result he wanted, was blocked in qualifying, and that was all a bit of a disaster and really not working for him in the races either, although he did pick up Trident's first point of the season, so of course they're now ahead of Campos, who, as I mentioned before, unfortunately still haven't scored a point. Things not going well for Ralph Boschung either. He had a mechanical issue in the sprint race, decent feature race for him, but no points to show for it. No points for Fualco either, which is a major, major disappointment. 2 points after 6 races in what is undoubtedly the best team on the grid, and really there's no other way of putting that. There has been bad luck, but he's simply not doing a good enough job. Prema have fallen to 4th, which they have no right to be down there. They should be leading this championship, or at the very least within touch of the first place. So yeah, Fualco definitely needs a big improvement. He's someone who needs a major, major confidence boost. Of course, De Vries got 2 penalties. I have to mention this. He had started the weekend with 2 3-place grid penalties. So, of course, had 6 in total. Started 14th in the feature race and came through to win the sprint race in the end of the weekend. So, in terms of, we were talking before about kind of luck and that, and I think that kind of proves that De Vries deserved that win. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We got camera as well. I think we had some friction on the team radio. I think the race engineer was basically shut up and drive to camera at the feature race, which I thought was a bit odd. For a rookie, thought it was a bit tight, but I don't know, maybe it was some kind of joke. But yeah, it's a bit hostile really there. So maybe keep an eye on that. If camera might fall out with the team or whatever. So we'll have to see. I certainly wouldn't be too happy after that. And Nicholas Latifi having a poor weekend, which was unfortunate. I think a mechanical issue in the feature race cost what was probably going to be kind of a round the reverse grid pole for the sprint race. So I think big opportunity there missed for Latifi. Big dose of misfortune for him, and I think that's pretty much the whole field covered for this. What was, I think, a good Monaco weekend overall. I think not Formula 2's best, but to be fair, the driving standards were pretty good apart from that Delhi Trasvisho incident, and we didn't see a red flag for once, which was certainly a nice novelty.
Yeah, I think that is just about everyone covered, and like you said, kind of the Monaco weekend you kind of expect from F2, minus what some people would say minus the first corner pile-up, possibly, that we have seen in recent years, of course. But no, like you said, Nick De Vries, kind of a standout performer out of those guys lower down in the championship. But for Fualco, of course, having another terrible weekend, obviously stalling on the grid in the feature race, so it's really, really not going well for him, and a bad weekend for Prema in general. But that is going to be about it for our Monaco talk. Moving on now, of course, to Baku, and like we said earlier, a lot of the attention going to this weekend is going to be on Matsushita, of course, after what happened last season. And if the race this year is anything like what we saw last year, then we are certainly in for a lot of drama. Obviously, the second year that we have gone to Baku, so really I think last year proved that pretty much anything can happen, although I would have thought that given what happened last year, the guys might be a little bit more careful this time heading to Baku. But obviously it's a fairly unique track in terms of that really, really long straight, but yet the street layout, of course, so another one where kind of the skill of the drivers might shine through. So have you got any kind of first thoughts going to this weekend, or maybe predictions for both the feature and the sprint race?
Well, my first prediction is that hopefully there's going to be nowhere near as much carnage as it was last year. I think we're going to see a lot better driving standards, because really it was pretty woeful. Like, most of the incidents were caused from just plain bad driving, really. So I think we'll definitely see an improved level of driving standards, but I think there's still going to be quite a fair bit of carnage. There's a few drivers, I think, which will be kind of very, very frustrated with their season so far, and that's going to kind of, I think, develop into, unfortunately, a few big incidents. Matsushita, was actually really, really quick here last year. I think he was, second on the grid and then kind of leading quite a few of the races. And of course, it all went wrong kind of on the safety car restarts for him. But if you take them away, then he was really, really strong all weekend. So yeah, I definitely expect Matsushita to be a major, major factor this weekend, and I really hope it goes well for him, of course, after what happened last year. Giovinazzi, of course, took both races last year, so I think it'll be tough to see a repeat of that from anybody to win both the feature and the sprint, but I'm expecting a lot more finishes this year in both races, and in terms of the guys at the front, I think it's still probably going to be Charles Leclerc, trying to get back from what happened, of course, in Monaco. Roland was pretty strong here last year, so I'd expect him to be up there. MP Motorsport as a whole were actually doing pretty decently. I think Daniel de Jong was even leading at one point before I think a major lockup where like 7 cars went off at turn 1. So I think basically it's slightly less carnage this year, and my predictions for the race winners, I'm going to go, I reckon Leclerc's going to get it, to be honest. I think he's going to hit back with a win in the feature race, and then I'm going to go for Matsushita possibly for the sprint race win. But again, a bit like Monaco, it's going to be a lottery, but at least at Baku it's certainly a lot easier to overtake with that however kilometre long straight.
Yeah, well, not for the first time this season. Our predictions for the 2 race winners are actually the exact same. I was thinking Leclerc will probably bounce back from his Monaco difficulties. Obviously, he'll be more than determined to do that. And speaking of determination, I'm sure Matsushita will be doubly determined this weekend to kind of prove his critics wrong, off the back of a couple of very strong weekends, of course. So he's got a bit of momentum and confidence going. So yeah, he was my pick as well for the sprint race. So we'll have to see how that one develops. And but obviously, like we said, if it's anything like last year with Giovinazzi's 2 extraordinary wins, then really anything could happen. But that is going to be it for our F2 Monaco review. Make sure to leave a like on this video and comment down below as well on your thoughts on this weekend and the championship as a whole. Where do we go from here in terms of Leclerc versus Ollie Rowland? And also subscribe to Motorcast for a lot more regular motorsport content, and follow us too on Twitter as well as Motorcast. The links will be in the description. And I'll see you next time, guys. Bye for now.